All right, well, hi, I'm Chris Brown. I'm the GIS coordinator for the Colorado Division of Water Resources, and I'm going to tell you a little bit about Map Viewer and GIS. I'm probably going to start with some slides, and then I'm probably going to dive into a live demo. First thing, yes, let me see that. I didn't think that was the second slide, but anyway. You know, map viewers, we have a lot of them. We've got a DWR map viewer. We've got a well permit viewer, which is a little scaled down of our full viewer. The CWCB's got a data viewer that's got some other CWCB thematic data in it. We've also got a snowpack assessment viewer. We've also got some SNODAS tools, which is another type of snow data viewer. And you can find those viewers either on the CDSS page. I always tell people just to type in CDSS into Google or whatnot, and usually we're at the top of the page. Sometimes there's some other results there. California's got a CDSS as well, and there's a country dance and song society, so you got to kind of ferret it out, but we're there, usually we're on the top. You know, here's an example on the, the CDSS page. You know, you can get to the different viewers here. So you can find them in a number of different places. But also on the CDSS page, and for those of you who may have been around for a while, we used to have GIS data on the Division of Water Resources page, but now we've consolidated all of our GIS holdings on the CDSS page, and it's really organized by either category or division. Now, initially Brian was talking about the different DSSs, and the DSSs are very basin specific. And so that's the same way the data's been developed as well, too. You know, it's like, for example, in the South Platte, we have a huge groundwater models on our groundwater data. In the Rio Grande, there may be some more surface water. We're developing it right now for the ARC DSS. But what you're going to find underneath this is, for example, we've got hydro-based point data here, for example, and that's data that you'll find under data by category, and that data is actually zipped up shapefiles that are updated nightly now. So just, as our well application database grows or we make changes to our structure database, these shapefiles are getting updated nightly now. And on the left side here, you can see a little bit of a description of what we have in Division 1. You can see, kind of get the idea of how we have some sort of thematic data going on GIS-wise. What you will find, though, in every basin, we do have irrigated lands data. And in some basins, we're going to have more. For example, the Platte, we're on a 5-year cycle right now of generating irrigated lands. But if you look, for example, in the Rio Grande, you'll find yearly data. If you're looking in the North Platte, you'll find yearly data. Going forward for the Republican Basin, you're going to find yearly data. I think we've done for the last couple of years. And I think we're going to probably be doing that with the Arkansas as well. So we're starting to ramp up and kind of starting to generate these files on an annual basis. But I'm here to talk mostly about the map viewer, and I'm going to talk about the DWR map viewer specifically. So I'm going to kind of dive in here and see how a little bit of a live demo will go with this. So our main DWR map viewer has over 200 layers in it, and that's a combination of historical imagery, Denver Basin Atlas information, historical Mylar data, which is the beginnings of GIS that we're still trying to digitize and make sense of for the Denver Basin, and plus a lot of our other standard GIS data, whether it be vector, polygon, point data, and whatnot. But the thing I always tell people when they first use the map viewer, and it doesn't really make any difference. It depends on, there's a lot of overlap between the CDSS pages and the map viewer, right? So if you're looking for very thematic data, you can start on the CDSS pages. If you're looking for structures with water rights, you're looking for well applications, and you're looking for something very specific, I'd say use the CDSS pages. But if you're looking to kind of get a lay of the land, sort of, or you just want to maybe search around and see what's available in a certain area, obviously the map viewer might be the better way to do it. But most folks, I usually try to drive people to our search box up here in the upper right-hand window, and this is kind of the way to Google our data. You can search by WDID. WDID is our Water District ID. You've heard that mentioned a couple times. You can search by receipt number, and receipt number is really our unique identifier for well applications. You can search by a permit number. Now, permit number is not unique in our database. It's usually unique by division, water division, but not unique statewide. You can search by an applicant name for a water right. You can search by a water right case number. You can also do an address search in here, for example. Usually, just to kind of show how this works, I usually Google myself in here a little bit and see what I usually get. We always like to Google ourselves. For example, I get a number of well applications around the state that are the applicant name is a Chris or a version of Chris Brown. Here's Christine, for example. And as I hover over these records in the results window over here, and I haven't turned on any data on the map at all, by the way, you'll start to see flags show up on the screen where that data might be located. So for example, from a high level, if you knew you were searching for a well application in Arapahoe County, there was, Chris Brown or Christine Brown, for example, had applied for, that might be your record right there. Kind of an easy way to search for stuff. You can also search by a WDID if you know the actual WDI of a structure. For example, I can type in the WDID for the Empire Ditch. And you'll see over here too in the results window that it subsets this data to some degree by the category it exists in the map viewer. And you'll also notice too that it looks for an instance of the string. So we can't really constrain your search, for example. It's just going to look for an instance of that string potentially within a larger number. So for example, if I knew I was searching for a surface water feature, for example, there's that WDID right there. But for example, if I was just to type in, say, 1, 2, 3, 4, 5, we might get a number of results that may be a little less accurate. For example, I know there's one final permit here in the state that actually has that as a permit number. But if I was to look here at structures, I might have to dig around in the database a little bit to find out. For example, here's a good example. 1, 2, 3, 4, 5 exists as part of the WDID for this structure, the Hill Ranch 1816, which looks to be like a spring or something. So that's just kind of the idea of how you can use the search box to find data within the map viewer. We also have a number of tools we've built into the map viewer as well. Under the quick tools here, you're going to find that, for example, we have this thing called the PLSS locator. We've also got a number of different ways to zoom to data, whether it's zoom to permit, to a section, UTM coordinates, lat long coordinates. But it's the locator that a lot of people use more than anything else. And so I'm going to click on that and kind of show you how this works. Now I could just pick a location on the map. I could enter a UTM location. I could enter PLSS corridors or distances. And when I say distances, that's actually entering distance from section lines to get a location. Say you have an old decree or something like that, and you're trying to figure out, well, what's the location this decree is spelling out? But just to show you how this works, I'm going to pick a location on the map. And to do this, I'm going to zoom in here a little bit. And we'll zoom in here, and I'll click next here. I'm going to capture geometry and follow the instructions here and say next. And now it's going to load in here basically the results that I've generated from this location. Well, the PLSS location here is, well, the section 11, range 68 west, 3 south. Here's some UTM coordinate information. If you're on the west slope, maybe you need that zone 12 information. We've also put in some latitude and longitudinal information in here. And then more importantly, maybe some boundary information. Which division is it in, what district, what county? Is it in a management district, designated basin? You're probably going to see us expand some of these boundary parameters a little bit and add a little more information in here. We've been in discussion of doing that. We'll see what happens. One thing you might not see in here, though, is that we're not generating distance from section lines as a returned value. And the reason we're doing that is because, especially if you start with a UTM coordinate, we don't want to basically, distance from section lines on the public land survey system is a less accurate description of place than a UTM coordinate. So we don't want to show both. We're trying to drive everybody now to using a UTM coordinate when locating a water right or locating a well permit or something like that, and kind of get away from describing things as distance from section lines. I'd also like to show you here how we've organized data. If you expand any of these data categories, and this is especially important for structures or well applications. If you zoom out to a certain distance on here, you'll see the points disappear, and you'll see sort of over here the label sort of gray out. So if you turn on, say, for example, structure information at the high level and it doesn't show anything, just zoom in until you see some points appear on your map. But you've also got to know, too, that you need to expand the data category here to actually see what's underneath it, because we've only by default turned on 1 or 2 layers potentially. And for this viewer in particular, we've turned on surface water structures under the structure admin decreed. If you were in our well permit viewer, it'd be groundwater structures. So we've been a little thematic there. By default, when you have layers turned on in the map viewer, if you left click on any feature, I'll left click on this guy right here, you're going to get something called map tips is going to appear, and it's going to have some pertinent information there about the structure. But it's also going to drill down through any other active layers you have too. So for example, my second return is Denver County because I have county layer on. But here, for example, I can see the Loomis ditch. I can see it's WDID. I can see that it's historic structure. You can see some case numbers involved here. But more importantly, I can click on this information here and say view additional details. And what it's going to do is it's going to show me the entire data table we have behind this structure. So I can scroll down here and see some more information, a water source mile. Since it's an historic structure and all the water rights have either been abandoned or whatnot, we got zeros in the decreed absolute amounts. Down here you can get some more information about it, but more importantly here, you can click on this hyperlink and that's going to take you right to the CDSS pages of this structure. And now you could actually get at the image documents or anything else that you might need to review when you're doing some research. What else do we have in here? We've got structure points of interest. These are measuring points or whatnot that may be related to a structure. Well applications, final permits, that's kind of our well permit or even sort of considered to be water rights to some degree in designated basins. We've got some groundwater information. We saw some presentations on geophysical logs and groundwater. In here we've got some transmissivity contours in here as well. Surface water current conditions in historic stations, that's our stream gauges, historic and current. Dam safety information in here, climate stations, source water hydrography, there's been a little discussion today about call analysis tool. If you're looking for the data that the call analysis tool is based off of, this is our source water route framework. It's a derivative of the NHD. You can download it from our CDSS page. For those of you who do GIS work, it's a linear reference data set. That's how we're generating stream miles. We also have in-stream flow information in here. Surface water supply index. This is basically surface water storage statewide, updated on a monthly basis. PLSS information down to quarters. Admin boundary information. We've updated this information recently. We've got some really nice visualizations, for example, of the Denver Basin in here. That actually, if you looked at any of our other Denver Basin files, for example, if I would have clicked on the middle of the Denver Basin here, you'll see that actually it now returns, for example, all the aquifers under a point as opposed to just showing outcrops. So that data set's been improved just recently. Got management district, all kinds of boundary condition data, water conservancy, conservation districts. You'll see in here some basin-specific information, Republican River measurement boundary. We got meters in all the wells in Republican Basin. We've also got a lot of our encumbered groundwater parcel information for well permitting, presumption well polygons, pre-213 cylinders, all organized by aquifer underneath here. So if you only need to see a certain aquifer, we've got them all turned on by default, but if you needed to look at a specific aquifer, you might need to turn some other layers off. I'm not going to let that draw because it might drag a bunch of stuff down. We've also got all of our irrigated lands data in here now. If you've been watching the map viewer evolve over the last few months, we used to have a lot of this data kind of cached someplace else. We've now moved it all back into the layer menu. So all the irrigated lands data now is available here. We've also recently just updated our statewide geology map. It actually looks really nice now. Let's see, I'll zoom out here and draw. It looks more like our hydrogeo team spent a lot of time symbolizing this map. We'll see if it can draw it. We're really chunking on the Wi-Fi right now. We've got a really nice state geology map here now that's been symbolized so you can really see some of the detail in the map. It's pretty sweet. We've also got some index map information here. If you're wondering about, for example, photo dates for historical photos, if you had an historical photo on, you can turn on this photo index, zoom in, for example, click on one of these cells here, and it's going to return some information about the photo date for a specific area. So if you're looking at historical NAPE imagery, DLQQ stuff, We haven't backfilled the NAPE for 13, 15, 17 yet, but we've got it up through 11. It also has a quad index in there as well. Base map imagery, some of the base map stuff here, we got all the NAPE imagery in here. As I was mentioning before, some of our atlas information, map cabinet information relates to well permitting. Just a lot of data. That's a lot of chunky data in there. Also, we've got even more data available under the layer catalog here, which is where we started to park some of our web services that you might want to get at. So if you're looking at the base National Hydrography dataset information, that's now in our web service here. So you can basically click on any one of these feature layers from the National Hydrography dataset and add it to the map, compare it to our data. We've also got what they call the WBD dataset here, Official Watershed Boundaries from the USGS. That's all in there too. This is their web service, so it's live and updated. So that's kind of about it, all the data we have in here. But most importantly here is if you want to get data out of the map, and how do I basically, if I want to export data, if I want to make collections of data, capture data on the screen, there's a couple ways of doing that. So I'm going to turn on some well applications here, and I've got some surface water structures. The first thing I'm going to do is I'm going to maybe use this identify tool, and this works a little bit different than using the map tips option. I'm going to turn this on, and I'm just going to kind of drag and drop and draw a box around those points there. Now, like I mentioned before, when I use this tool to do an identify, it's going to subset the data by the different classes we've organized the data in within the map viewer. So for example, I've got my surface water structures here, I got some constructed wells, and I got my county. Basically the layers that I have turned on have been returned. But maybe I don't necessarily want to see those just in a list on this side. I want to see them in a table at the bottom of the map. So if you all saw that, I use what they call the panel actions menu there. We all see it now in every web application now or whatever, especially mobile. Looks like a stack of pancakes, hamburger, whatever you want to call it. Basically, you can use that to toggle and basically put the data now in a table version at the bottom of your map. Now, it does eat up a bunch of your map window, especially when you're using it on a laptop like this. It eats up a bunch of screen size, but actually I can dock those labels there and get rid of them a little bit. But you can see it subset my data here in basically spreadsheet format. And actually, when I hover over each of these records, it's going to kind of show me where that record exists on the map up here. And I can't really see because I got to pull this guy down a little bit. But you'll see as I hover over each one of these records, it's going to put a flag over it and hover and show me which record I'm looking at. I can also get that data out of the map if I want by exporting it as a CSV, spreadsheet, Excel spreadsheet, or a shapefile. Now, if you export this as a shapefile, what it's going to do is it's basically going to zip all these files up and give you three different, in this case, three different feature classes of data. Your well-constructed, surface water, and then some county boundary, basically. Same thing with the spreadsheet. You'll basically get back a spreadsheet with tabs. There's a couple different ways of doing that. If you need to dock this back up and make it a list here again too, you can just put it back up there on the left-hand side by saying switch it back to a list. And I can close out my results too just by closing these windows. I'm going to put my tool labels back on up here too as well. We've also got a couple other features here too under the sharing side. We've got an export feature. If you needed to take a screenshot of your map, you can do that using export. It exports in a number of different ways. You can do JPEG, TIFF, PDF if you need to. That's if you just need a screenshot, right? You can also print a map. And what that's going to do is actually going to wrap your print window into like basically a title block that's got a date stamp on it. It's got, you can modify the title of it. It's going to have a little legend in there. You can put some notes in it. There's a couple other things you can do. You can customize your map, basically. We've also got a way to upload data as well, too. So a couple things about this is the best way this works is actually using a shapefile. If you want to upload your own data, whether it's your own boundary condition or something like that, or some other data maybe you've collected in the field or some other random data, you could upload this as a shapefile. That's the best way to do it. It has to have the projection information to load correctly. You can also upload a CSV or an Excel spreadsheet KML works pretty decently as well as a GPX file. But if you have coordinates in there, for say points, they need to be in WGS84 lat long coordinates for it to work. It's very specific. It won't take UTM coordinates or something else like that. And that's why I usually say the best thing to do with this is probably just use a shapefile. If you can generate a shapefile of the points you want to load, that's the best way to go. We've also got here, you can also search for web services that are available. If you have a web service that you know about GIS data that you want to add to the map, you can add the web address of that web service in here, and it'll add it into the map too as well. I'm trying to think what else we got underneath this tab here as well. This is also available to you. The map viewer is also available to you mobile. So if you want to use the map viewer in your phone or whatever, you can basically navigate to our site. You can also bookmark it on your phone and make a button for it. But you can find your current location by using this feature here. If you're using it in a mobile, I've used it a couple times in the field. It works pretty good if you have a decent cell signal. You can also either zoom in and out here using these buttons here. You can see it's got some mobile friendliness down here at the bottom. You can toggle between the different base maps down here if you wanted to. Obviously, we got USGS topo maps here too available as a service. All this stuff's available here at the bottom of the map using your fingers if you're on mobile, or using your mouse here when you're on a desktop. As we keep going through the different options here of different tools we have available to you, we can always draw and annotate the map. We've got text tools in here under the draw tools. You can draw a number of features if you needed to, say, for example, make a map and put in the permit number for a certain well here or something like that, or draw some annotations on the map to highlight a certain feature you want to show. You could do that as well. Like, for example, you can just go there and draw a nice circle, for example. Like the tool let me do it. Oftentimes you'll find that you have to also, when you go to use a tool, you'll see that it shows a blue box around there. Sometimes you may close out of a toolbar and say, like, why does this new tool doesn't work? Well, it's because you were still had an old tool active. You got to click off of it to make it unactive or inactive. You can also plot coordinates here under the Draw tab. For example, I could enter a UTM coordinate over here, latitude or longitude. I could also enter a zone 12 coordinate if I needed to. The official coordinate system of DWR is UTM NAT 83 zone 13. We do accept, we have a number of ways to convert coordinates. If you find on the CDSS pages, we have a location tool. Actually now in a distance calculator we have on there as well. Works very similarly, uses the same service as a lot of our other converters. But you can also just pick a coordinate on the map and just plot it. And if you want to, you could switch that on the fly to latitude and longitude if you need to. So depending on however you're getting your coordinates, you can convert them in if you need to submit a well application, or you need to submit a water rights application or a change of location, anything like that. If you're capturing the points, say for example, even in Google Maps, and you have 4 to 5 decimal places on your lat long, that's as accurate as a UTM coordinate. You can come into our tools, whether it's a location converter tool or into the map viewer, you can turn that into a UTM coordinate for an application. You can enter multiple points here. If you get a bunch of points all over your map, for example, and you need to get rid of stuff and you've drawn all over your map and you've done a bunch of analysis, the Edit Drawing tab here is really where you get rid of that stuff. And you can singularly remove the stuff that you've drawn on the map, or you can just clear everything and start over. Similarly too, you can go in here and draw a bunch of stuff on the map, and then I could export these drawings out. So for example, if I drew some features on the map and I want to turn those into a shapefile or something like that, you can export those features out by exporting these drawings. We've also got a number of ways on the map to measure data, whether it's distance or area. I can go in here and I can start to measure a reach of stream if I needed to. And I can get the results there. Well, if I needed to have those results actually in a different format, I can change those results on the fly from feet to miles if I needed to. Same thing with area. In fact, we probably give you enough units here, you can find whatever you need. If I double click this at the end, I could actually change that to square miles or square feet or whatever you needed. Whatever calculation you needed those units in, those can be changed as well on the fly. Number of different ways of doing that. You can also have some other measure tools over here. If you just wanted to trace or reach a stream really fast, you could actually do it with a freehand tool just by holding down a left click and just kind of tracing over something. Lots of ways to play around to annotate your map and do analysis. Under the Find tab, we've got a number of different ways to kind of query data and show how it works on the map. So I'm going to zoom out here a little bit and find a place up here along the, oops, see, that's a perfect example there. I'm still measuring something over here. Let me zoom up here along the Platte here. Go up here on Fort Morgan somewhere. So under the Find tab here, like I was mentioning before, we've got a number of different ways to make subsets of data. And that's really what this tool is really about, is just to visualize or build subsets of data or just find out data about where you're at. And one of the ways you can do this too is we also have a buffer tool in here as well. So you'll see when I click under point reference here, and any of these tools you put under Find Data, and even up front here on the home page when I click the Identify tool, you'll see as an Enable Buffering tool here. But more importantly here under the Find tab, what you can do with a point buffer, for example, I can go here and enable buffering. And say I needed to find data within a certain distance, we'll say 1 mile of a point. Say I'm going to click on this guy right here. Well, let me go continue first. Now I can go ahead and click. It's always good to follow the instructions. And there we go. So it's going to show my buffer on the screen, and it's going to return all the active layers within that buffer in my results window. So for example, if I click on the 22 constructed wells here, those are the 22 constructed wells within a mile of the well or the location I chose. Similarly, same as I showed you before, you can click on an individual record. You're going to have access to the data table, access to the CDSS pages for that record. You could dock it at the bottom of the map. I can actually get the exports up here at the top. If I go back to my original list, I can export it out right there. It doesn't depend on where you're at. You don't have to be in a table. You could be over here on the side. You can close that out here too. Clear that, close that. Oop. Turn off the buffer tool. I'm going to disable buffer. Actually, here we go. We've also got a number of ways here to do some queries and filters on data. Now, query and filter work exactly the same way. It's the way you set up the query or filter, but they return results differently. So for example, if I'm using query, it's going to return results in my results window, and if I use filter, it's going to filter what I see on the map. So first I'll show you query. So for example, in this area, what you first have to decide what you're going to do is what you're showing on the map versus what you want to see here. So I'm going to do a query on wells that are constructed. That's the default layer I've got on here. If I go back here to well applications, again, if you open up and expand it, the green dots are constructed wells. Go back here to my query section. First thing I have to do is I have to drop this down and find well constructed. It's not well applications, it's the subset of the data of how we described it in the layer menu. And then I'm going to say, well, I only want to, basically show a return in my current extent here. Current extent. And now I'm going to drop down some parameters I want to see. So the first thing I'm going to do is I'm going to say, well, I want to see wells with a yield, say, greater than, and I'm going to start typing some numbers in here, maybe 500 GPM. And then I'm going to add a condition here. Maybe the depth is greater than, say, 50 feet. I'm going to search. Okay, so it found, within that area, it found 92 records of wells that are more than 500 GPM, greater than 50 feet in depth. Well, the units in our database for constructed wells, the yields in GPM, the depths in feet. Yeah. So, yeah, it's true. You do not. It's not an acre feet or anything else. It's GPM. Again, you can get that data out right here. If you needed to build a spreadsheet of that, you could do that right there on the fly. Similarly, if I was to run this same query, but as a filter, again, you would drop this down to constructed wells. Say I want to do the current extent here again. Same information. I want to do, say, yield is greater than 500. And another condition here, and I said depth was what? Greater than 50 feet, right? Greater than 50. I'm going to filter that. Now you're going to see that's only what I see in my map now. So if you needed to print out a map of this area and say this map is thematic and it only wants to show wells that are greater a certain depth or maybe even a use, right? I want to do use 1, irrigation. I could do that as well. In fact, I could clear this filter, go back and we'll say, well, let's actually add that. Let's go in and say, well, how about use? I don't know if it's going to change much here, but I'm going to say use 1 contains, and as you actually will see this, if I kind of type in an I here, it's going to bring up irrigation. And I can filter that, and maybe that number got to be a bit less. But then you can just keep adding conditions as much as you need to get down to what you really want to see on the map. Again, you know, if I was only interested in an area, say I was like, oh, well, I got those kind of filtered out really nice. And you know something, I was only interested in seeing what was in a section over here, for example. I could turn on my section coverage, zoom into an area. Now I've got my wells filtered, and I can just draw a box around these guys because it looks like they're in section 16. And now when I draw a box around those guys, I'm only going to get those 4 constructed wells within section 16 that meet those parameters. So just another way of getting data out of the map. Now, you're going to see this tab here be appeared. This is something we're in for internal use only. We don't have, you can't edit in the map. We're going to be something else for internal users only. And granted, we're not going to be giving sign-ins to the public, but so I get that question occasionally, what does the sign-in button mean, or what does the edit tab mean, and why is there nothing underneath? Well, the reason is because that's for internal use only. Is there any questions right now about the map viewer? How many out there use the map viewer? Well, almost everybody, right? We've had this application going on for a while. Does anybody have any questions about the data we use in the map viewer? Sure. The question was, are we going to have web services for GIS data going forward? Yes, and we do intend to start that up again. We're trying to push it onto what we call our Office of Information Technology and have them serve up that data. Not only our data, but a lot of other agencies' data as well. So we're hoping that that's going to come back. Anybody else? Map viewer. Yes, metadata. Let me pull some of that up here. I'm going to go down here to our irrigated lands. So you'll see with the layers, so let me go back and show you where this came from here. When you open up a layer, and you'll see this arrow right here. There's a couple of different options underneath this arrow. Now, we can do a couple things where you can actually toggle on some labels or customize labels. But here you'll see the metadata. Oh, isn't that great? File not found. I hadn't checked this recently. We have generated a bunch of metadata files, and we're still kind of struggling, I guess, to get them to work right. I thought that was going to work. They're in there. For the layers that have metadata, and I apologize as a GIS person, our metadata has been really poor lately. You will find metadata in all of our downloadable files on the web, and we have metadata associated with those files, and we're trying to get it into a format that works in the map viewer. We just upgraded the map viewer back in December to allow us to have this metadata in there. Previously, they didn't even have a tab for it, so I got to get back in the office and check on that. But that being said, I wasn't really going to go into this, but I'll show you some of the stuff that you can do in the map viewer, which, for example, if we've chosen symbology that doesn't work for you, for example, there's a number of people in our office who are colorblind, for example, right? And it made it really difficult. In fact, our previous state engineer was colorblind, couldn't see blue. So imagine trying to make a map for the state engineer, water themed, can't use blue, right? So I'm going to show you a couple things here we can do, for example, that might help you a little bit visualizing on the map. Let me turn some stuff off here. It's like going crazy. We'll zoom in here, and what I'll do here is I'll turn off a bunch of stuff here. If you hit this arrow to the right of any of our layer themes here, you're going to see customized labels is one of the options here. And you're going to say, well, I want to customize that. And say I want to label WDID here in the map on top of structures. I can go ahead and apply that to the map right there and say, now I've got WDIDs labeled on top of the feature. You could do this with permits, numbers on well applications, for example. Basically, anything that's in the data table, you could label it on the map in your view. You can also, and I can just close that out and that'll stay up there. You can also turn on visualizations. So you get in here and say, yes, I want to customize that visualization and say, man, I really don't like maybe that, let me see if I can change this to like this color or something, or maybe I got to use this here. Orange. Now I can change those to orange circles or something like that. Maybe you didn't like our pink color for surface water structures. So you can get in there and mess with that a little bit as well and sort of customize your map and print that out, and you'll save those customizations in your printout. Let's see what else we have underneath there. Toggle the labels off and on. You can turn the labels off and on here just by doing that if you've customized them. Let's see if we got metadata for structures. There we go. Maybe it was just the irrigated lands that was bad. But here we've got metadata in here for structures. So if you're wondering at some of our cryptic column headers in here, we can scroll down through that and you're going to find a little bit of information in here, like, is it a minimum flow? What do these different values mean in here for all the different structure types? Especially when you get down here to water source mile and some of that other stuff. If you're wondering about that, at least some of the metadata works. Maybe I need to go through all 200 of those layers and start making some notes, I guess. I don't know. So metadata is not entirely broken. But again, that's all underneath. Each individual data layer has those tasks available to them. You can change your visualizations. You can label features. There's a number of different things you can do. Does anybody else have any other questions? Well, we do have bookmark data views here. So you can make your own bookmarks. You can bookmark a current extent. That may save it to your laptop or your computer, your desktop or something like that. I think it might save it for you. I know it bookmarks the location, but I don't know if the Necessaries save what you have turned on. There is something though, if there is something up here though as well. We have the share button here, and that's kind of available to you guys. It's not all of our tools are available, but the share button here is kind of unique, and it requires a little bit of work on your end, but you can make a map or zoom into a location and turn on features on the map. And then you can hit this share button, and if you can configure your default email client, for example, mine's Google at work, and there's a couple of different ways you can do this online. If you were to click this email here, for example, on my desktop, it brings up Google Maps with a URL in it right off, not Google Maps, but Gmail with a URL in it that actually I can send to somebody and it'll zoom to the map location with all the layers I've turned on. So it's kind of a way to bookmark that if you want to share or collaborate with somebody using the map viewer. It just takes a little extra work to find out how to configure your email client on your desktop to be able to do that. Obviously in here it looks like you can share it to your Facebook as well too if you needed to, or Twitter something, I don't know. But you can do that as well if you wanted to do that. But that's probably the way to be probably more collaborative using the map viewer than trying to say use a bookmark or something like that for the general public. I'm just trying to think off the top of my head if there's anything else. I've kind of shown you quite a bit on this Does anybody else have any other questions about, or frustrations maybe they've had with the map viewer? No, so for example, the shapefile, you just have to have a defined projection for the shapefile. Doesn't make any difference what it is. But if you're using coordinates out of a spreadsheet, those need to be in lat-long WGS84. And it'll ask you for what the coordinate values. You might even have to specify that it's latitude and longitude. I've only done it a couple times. I usually use a shapefile. If you're trying to do a stream mile for a point on our source water framework, is that what you're wondering about, how to derive a stream mile? So if you're familiar with GIS data, it's a linear reference data set. We don't have a way to click on the framework itself in the map viewer and say, what's the stream mile at this location? What you can do, though, is you can download our source water framework from the CDSS page. And if you have basic ARC view tools, and I think linear referencing might be available in QGIS, I'm not certain. But the linear reference tools are basic version ArcGIS, and you can plop your points in on top of our framework and generate stream miles like that. Now, but the one thing you need to know, and it's in the metadata for the source water framework, that the units are meters, so you got to convert that to miles. That's all. Thanks very much. That's all I got for the map viewer.